Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
That's a very good question. I think.
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Jack Teague, here. Jack, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Keenan, and hi, anybody watching the podcast. My name is Jack Teague. I live in the Southeast, and I'm a screenwriter and an actor. And Keenan has been kind enough to invite me to come on his show, so I'm tickled to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's get tickling, shall we?
All right.
So the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So a lot of people would probably agree that you start as a comic and you evolve into a comedian. Would you agree, Jack?
Yeah, I think so. I think a person who is funny naturally is certainly bound to go that way, especially if it finds an audience. So that's kind of, I guess that's kind of the way I look at it.
Okay. Well, let's go with the first question, which is about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
Well, I'll tell you, I was thinking about that because in the South, that's part of the what people find funny when there's an audience. There's a couple of well-known, at least regionally, Southern comedians. One is a man from Mississippi. Both of them are passed now, but one is a man from Mississippi named Jerry Clowers. And his audience related to him very well because he told his jokes in a very country way, so to speak, or rural way. And a lot of his material was experiences that the Southern crowd could relate to. Things such as coon hunting and things like that. And so it's pretty funny when you hear him telling it. And of course, the way he inflects and the range in his voice when he's telling his stories. The other man that I can tell you about is a man named Justin Wilson. And Justin is a Cajun. And they have a very distinctive French Arcadian accent, if you've never heard them before. And a large part of what's funny about the way Justin told jokes was reversing language. And it was taken from his origins. I mean, that was the way his community spoke. And once you figured out what he was saying, because it wasn't always easy with his accent, his material was hilarious. And it was very relatable to people who are natives of Louisiana, particularly the Cajun people. So.
Okay, so when you say reversing language, are you referring to something like Pig Latin, where you take the last letter of the word and put it in the front? Okay.
Well, it's sort of like that, except it's actually taking the whole word and putting it out of order in the sentence.
Oh, I see.
All right.
Okay.
So he might say something like, and it had this very heavy accent, but it was like, I'm so glad for you to see me today, my friend, like that, something like that. And so it really, you had to listen to it a long time. And both of these gentlemen made albums that you could buy, so, but they were very popular in the South. And so that voice, as you were talking about, really is a large part of what made them funny, even though the material was funny in itself. And so anyway, I guess hopefully I answered your question.
Absolutely. That's the classic switch formula. So, by itself, it's not funny by switching up like that. But if you add that third element with the accent and kind of an inherent quality of misunderstanding, I could see how it could be very funny. So does authenticity matter, or is illusion part of the magic?
I think illusion is part of the magic. honestly. I think someone who is a comedian, once they clue into this technique that resonates with their audience, they'll use it repetitively throughout their careers.
Yep.
And so when their audience comes to one of their performances, they're expecting this
Hmm.
in that performance.
Yeah,
And so, it becomes a trademark kind of thing for them.
absolutely. Well, that rolls into the next question, which is about punching up versus punching down. So, where do comics versus comedians stand on this? And let me put it in some historical context.
Okay.
Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
That's a very good question. I think probably the people that maybe draw the most laughs are people that punch down, simply because the audience, a lot of the audience will not see themselves in that victim, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly, punching up has its own set of humor, its own humorous opportunities. Um, and a lot of times it's because punching up, the subject can't those subjects cannot really relate to the audience, or punching down themselves. I mean, or being punched, I guess is actually a better way to put it. And so sometimes they can laugh at themselves, a lot of times they can't. And it just goes with the personality, I think, for that.
So, would you say the audience's agreement with the comedian is a form of permission or alignment?
um, I would say alignment, probably. uh, if they Let's say, for example, you have an audience, a blue collar audience. um, if they cannot relate to uh, a class above them in any way, they'll probably find less humor in what the material is, simply because they can't place it. The other thing too is regionality, for example. And I'm a big fan of Seinfeld. That show was great. um, Jerry and Larry David both are geniuses, comedic geniuses. Um, but for a lot of people that, say, for example, that live in the South, and if you're rural particularly, you can't really relate to the humor in that urban environment up there. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about, I think.
Well, that does lead into the next question, which is about the cultural translation of comedy. So, how
Mhm.
do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think also it kind of is the same issue.
Hmm.
Um, I think that if you live in Italy, there's going to be things that are funny to you, for example, than if you live in uh, Utah or something. Um, I think certainly the world is getting more cosmopolitan, so to speak, and so, and it's particularly with exporting entertainment. Like, for example, shows or movies. Even if that's not something that happens where you live, you can actually become more versed in it and maybe find some humor.
Okay. So, would you say that comics are more universal while comedians are more culturally specific?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree
Okay.
with that.
Excellent. Well, let's roll to the next one, which is crowd work versus crafted work. So, if a comic riffs like influencers doing crowd work, and a comedian performs like in reaction videos doing crafted work, where is the sweet spot?
I think it's a matter of reach, so to speak, audience reach. If and then there's also the difference between secular material or blue material, for example, versus the clean comic. I think that audience is going to be smaller in general. The faith audience, so to speak, is probably going to be smaller in general just because of the way the world is today. But I think the secular person is going to have a wider reach, for example. I think. I hope that answers that question well.
No, absolutely. It sounds like perhaps that would lean more into the comic, being more universal in a sense, right? So is
Yeah.
that anyone can identify with secular, I guess, to a point. Most people that are religious are usually dismissing of another person of their existence as much, but who knows? Who knows, right? It's all different. So
There's a fine line these days.
sure, yeah, because you want to be relevant at the very least, right? So,
Right.
so what happens when a comic leans too much into crowd work, or when a comedian gets heckled?
I think it can destroy a career, for example, and I'll use Michael, the guy that played Kramer on Seinfeld.
Uh,
When the show was over, he was started doing some stand-up comedy, and when he was heckled, he became combative or belligerent back to the audience.
hmm.
And I think his career is still trying to recover from that today to an extent. So I think if you push your sensibilities too far, one way or the other, you can lose the audience. And the more people talk about what happened in that show, for example, um, it tends to spread that persona, of the comedian who's lost their way, or maybe, maybe a lot of people like her, but for example, Roseanne Barr has kind of gone out onto a very lateral position on a lot of stuff. And, so unfortunately for them, for that actor or for that comedian, it may actually put them, say, unhireable, so to speak, almost.
That's true. Well, that leads us to the next point, which is advertising and self-promotion. So, who advertises themselves more, a comic or a comedian? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
I would think probably comedian, more than likely. It's in any performance medium, it's a struggle to emerge from the horde, so to speak. And it doesn't matter what your discipline is, whether it's comic or drama or whatever. You still have to find some niche that will elevate you above your competition, so to speak, or your peer group, whatever. And so that's I think that's what you would ask.
Yeah, pretty much. So is self-promotion seen as selling out, or is it necessary for survival?
I think it's really necessary for survival, to tell you the truth. There was a time when the media, so to speak, would be your promotion, and you didn't have to go out and seek it. Nowadays, in order to gain that same sort of exposure to the public, you've got to do some things yourself that will do. You either hire it done or you do it yourself. That's what I think.
Well, that leads us to the next question about censorship and offense. So, does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point like a magician?
I think a comedian courts it. Um, Sometimes that outrageousness, so to speak, can uh, actually gain you that notoriety. And like if you think back on, for example, some things that George Carlin says,
Hmm.
that an audience could take that well and laugh at it, or else some of the audience will be offended by it because they disagree with his position. So, but nonetheless, it's like that old saying: "I don't care if you misspell say my name right, just spell it right." Something like that. I forget exactly what it says, but that's the idea.
Okay.
There
So,
is
who
no
would,
bad publicity. There's only publicity.
ah, well, then who survives better in a cancel culture environment?
Probably the comic. uh,
Oh,
I think if they dial them, if they get a sense of what their material is doing to their audience, how they're receiving it,
hmm,
and try to adjust so as to not go too far one way or the other, uh, they probably it's the comic.
okay. Okay. Well, so that definitely links us to timing and delivery, science or art. So, do comics rely more on structure and comedians more on rhythm and emotion?
Um, it's a good question. I think each one of them, um, each discipline, comic or comedian, has to master that particular, uh, whether it's art or whether it's science. I think science can be too clinical sometimes, unless you're nimble on your feet and you can actually pivot if you see something's not working. Um, the art is actually finding that thing that makes people laugh and using it.
That definitely, I'll go with that. So, the art is the laughter, and the science is the pivot. If
That's right.
you
That's right. Exactly. That's a good way to relate it. Yeah.
would you think that the comic can pivot better than the comedian, or does it more often? Maybe.
I yeah, I would say the comic, if they use the art to construct their spiel, um, unless they make a conscious effort to have a backup plan, so to speak, they can find themselves on stage without any laughter and perhaps people getting up and leaving.
Huh.
Uh, the the comedian, I think a lot of comedians have thought through their jokes, and that's the science of it. Is there maybe comics are more spontaneous, while comedians are more deliberate and uh, organized, so to speak. What they're going to say.
They know what to expect instead of it being, and part of the expectation is the spontaneity. They somehow found the magic
Yes,
potion.
that's
All
exactly.
right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
So laughter versus applause. Are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks that validate the message?
I think in some cases, comedians don't. They may not even get to hear the applause. They Laughter is their medicine, so to speak. Now the comic, they certainly are looking for affirmation in their material, and applause is their affirmation.
So that's like the other way around. You don't think you don't think the comics are chasing laughs?
Well, I think it's a secondary benefit or secondary reward for their material. They certainly would hope to get laughter from their audience. But the applause is a lot more affirmative than just laughter, I think.
So this is interesting. I'm going to touch on this. Could it possibly be sympathetic applause?
Certainly. It certainly could be. I think that would be harder to get than the entertainment aspect of it.
Okay. So comedy is commentary. When does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
I guess I would say probably politics is the most dangerous area for a comedian to wander into, just because you don't know the politics of everyone that's in your crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can keep it more related to observations that are not political, directly political, overtly political, then I think it's a safer path to tread. And it just depends on on the level of confidence that the comedian has in terms of being able to recover if if something goes wrong in the monologue or whatever.
So is that good, or does it dilute the humor?
Well, it's certainly, I would say it probably does dilute the humor to tread lightly on sensitive subjects. But I guess it's a matter of career survival. It depends on whether you think that you can continue to get booked. you know.
Fair enough. So comedy and vulnerability. I would argue comics potentially hide behind their jokes and comedians expose themselves. If you agree, which one is braver?
Um, I would certainly say the comedian, to expose yourself. And a lot of times that makes you more relatable to the audience if they can see themselves in something you're telling them about you. And especially if you can deliver it with a timing that is that's critical, I think, too.
Okay, I would go with that. So, final question about legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comic's Type 5 survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Um, I think clearly the comedian's point of view and deliver the material they use is probably going to survive longer. I mean, if you think back on all of the sitcoms that survive into reruns today, for example, and you could start as far back as the 60s or with the Andy Griffith Show, just about find that on any channel somewhere to watch. And then we move into the Beverly Hillbillies and the Flip Wilson Show, which were a lot more variety shows almost sometimes, but they always had a comic tinge to them. Then we move into the Friends, the sitcom Friends, and look how long that's persisted. And now we're in Seinfeld, 10 years old and still out there. So you can, and Raymond, everybody loves Raymond. So if you look at the longevity of all of those shows, that's what you're looking at as the comedians and what they did. The laugh machine is a great help sometimes. Canned laughter, but I think people would find a lot of the material hilarious without that. It's just a cue.
All right. So, where can everybody find you online, Jack?
Well, I have an IMDb account, which shows a lot of the work I've done. I've been full time in this since 2014, and I did a lot of acting and auditioning to start with. No major stuff, but a lot of independent films. And but lately I've been writing a lot, and so that's kind of that. I'm on LinkedIn, which is where you and I met. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter. So,
Excellent.
yeah,
Excellent.
I'm one of those people that have to make my own publicity, so to speak, as well as it is or not. You know?
Oh, that's why we're here. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to create something from nothing,
There
right?
you go. Absolutely. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And so for everybody watching, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me, Keenan.